Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Beth Strausser, and I work in the policy office at the National Science Foundation. It is my pleasure to welcome you today to the Fall 2023 Virtual Grants Conference. This is the third day of our NSF Virtual Grants Conference. And I am now pleased to present this session, which will cover programs in the Biological Sciences Directorate. And this session will be presented by Dr. Betsy von Holle. So take it away, Betsy.
Hi, my name is Betsy von Holle. I'm from the Division of Environmental Biology within the Biology Directorate, and I'll be joined later by some of my colleagues representing their divisions in the Biology Directorate. So today I'm going to go over three main topics in our presentation. We will be done with plenty of time for questions, and we encourage you to post them through the Q&A function. First, I'm going to give an overview of the Biology Directorate, followed by information on biology funding programs, and finally, some tips on how you can connect with us after this conference. So the Directorate for Biological Sciences the objective of it is to enable discoveries for the understanding of life, advance the frontiers of biological knowledge, and provide a theoretical basis for prediction within complex, dynamic living systems through an integration of scientific disciplines. So the Biology Directorate is organized into 4 divisions, and these divisions support research spanning all scales of biological organization, from the smallest molecules to cells in the Molecular Cellular Biosciences Division to organisms and organismal systems in the IOS, or the Integrative Organismal Systems Division, to larger communities, ecosystems, and the environment in the Division of Environmental Biology. The 4th division is the Division of Biological Infrastructure, which supports human resources and research infrastructure across all biological disciplines. I'm going to go over these programs and priorities of these divisions in the next few slides, but it's important to note that the Biology Directorate encourages research that cuts across biological disciplines. So if your research project interfaces with more than one program or division, we have mechanisms in place for not only co-review and co-funding, but also integrative interdisciplinary programs. So as you develop your idea, we encourage you to contact a program director, and that is an important job, part of our job, to give you feedback on your proposal for the most suitable panel of reviewers. So our directorate, by the numbers, we generally support around $831 million in research funding, typically evaluate approximately just over 4,000 proposals per year, and just over 1,000 awards made per year with a 24% funding rate. We support over 400 institutions on an annual basis, approximately 140 postdoctoral fellows, and as well as 14,000 individuals ranging from senior researchers to undergraduate researchers. Within the Biology Directorate, we support 81 NEON sites, which provide publicly accessible data, as well as 28 LTER sites, which examine long-term change, as well as partner with 7 international funders across all the areas of biology. Recently, we have started new programs with a focus on broadening participation, as well as there are also lots of integrative programs that the Biology Directorate, as well as the divisions, initiate and support. So the biology priorities in FY 2024 include, as you would expect, emerging infectious diseases. This includes a transdisciplinary approach to build an integrative understanding of the fundamental mechanisms that enable or prevent pathogen infection and spread. We are also focusing on building a resilient planet And so those questions include, how does the warming climate affect all forms of life, from plants to animals? What are the feedback loops that instigate further warming? And how can we harness biological mechanisms and processes to mitigate climate change? Another focal area is advancing emerging industries. And so these include cross-cutting advances in biology, computing, engineering, and mathematics, which spur rapid development of capabilities in biotechnology that drive innovation within the US bioeconomy. We also encourage integration across the biological sciences. So we continue to prioritize the integration of biological subdisciplines, as well as the trans and cross-disciplinary work that is needed to address the grand challenges in biology. And last, the Biology Directorate is creating opportunities everywhere. Across NSF is strongly committed to the development of a future-focused science and engineering workforce that draws on the talents of all Americans wherever they are found. We recognize that increasing participation and representation in the STEM disciplines is critical to develop better science, better economic outcomes, as well as a better workforce. So now, as I mentioned, the next set of slides are going to describe some of the funding programs in the Biology Directorate. And first, I'm going to go over the 4 biology divisions. Okay, so the first division that we'll go over is the MCB division, which involves 4 core programs: the cellular dynamics and function, molecular biophysics, genetic mechanisms, and systems and synthetic biology. As well as these core programs, there are a number of special programs and tracks. So each of these clusters and special programs are described in more detail on the MCB website. And so I encourage you to visit that to learn more specifically about each of these programs. And this will be true as I navigate through all of the divisions. The next one I'm going to describe is the iOS division, which is similarly structured to the MCB division with 4 research clusters and the PGRP, or the Plant Genome Research Program. They also have a variety of special programs and tracks. EDGE, which is the Enabling Discovery Through Genomics program, is now in collaboration with the NIH. And then they have a couple of more recent programs: the Organismal Response to Climate Change, as well as the Partnership to Advance Conservation Science and Practice. So DEB is structured similarly with 4 clusters, and these 4 clusters are split into 2 what we call super clusters. One is ecology, which includes the ecosystem sciences and the population and community ecology programs. And then the evolution supercluster, which includes the evolutionary processes program, as well as the systematics and biodiversity science program. There are a number of special programs and tracks within the Division of Environmental Biology, which are listed here. We are going to go over some of these as we describe some of these special programs. But again, please do check out these different programs and tracks on the DEB website. So DBI is structured into 3 broad clusters supporting human resources, research resources, as well as centers, facilities, and additional research infrastructure. Some of these new programs in the human resources category are the BRC Bio program, building research capacity for new faculty. We'll talk about that a little bit later, as well as the research and mentoring for post-baccalaureates in biological sciences. In the research resources program, you have a variety of different sources for supporting research. And then in the physical infrastructure, the centers, facilities, and research infrastructure program, you also have a variety of different targeted programs, including the Biology Integration Institute and the Center for Advancement of Synthesis of Open Environmental Data and Sciences. And so before we move on from these biology core programs, let me address some pretty common questions that we receive here in the Biology Directorate in terms of what is not supported. So biological research on mechanisms of disease in humans, which include the etiology, diagnosis, or treatment of a disease or disorder, is normally not supported because that's within the purview of the National Institute for Health. Biological research to develop animal models of such conditions or the development or testing of procedures for their treatment are also not normally eligible for support in the Biology Directorate. However, there are other directorates such as engineering, math, physical, computer, or information sciences that do support these types of research questions in terms of the etiology, diagnosis, or treatment-related goals to advance knowledge for those directorates are eligible for support. And so those types of research objectives can be addressed within those other directorates. So another big question is, when is the best time to submit my proposal? And so at the outset, what we should say is that the Biological Sciences Directorate has no deadlines for investigator-initiated research proposals. And so the idea is to just submit your proposal when you think it's ready. So there's no limit on proposal non-overlapping, obviously, proposal submissions as a PI or co-PI. And basically, during this new program where there are no deadlines, we just hold panels constantly throughout the year so that we can ensure that timely review. So the average time to decision for each proposal is on average about 6 months. Some programs do have deadlines, and those are the special programs. And as we describe each of those throughout this presentation, I'll call out upcoming deadlines. Okay, so now we're moving into the cross-bio and NSF interagency programs. Again, please post your questions through the Q&A function. So the first one is called INT Bio, or Integrative Research in Biology. The Biology Directorate is very interested in supporting integrative research and has moved this used to be a program, it's into a track now in the core solicitation. And so this type of research includes projects where the team, through their complementary expertise, can achieve some synergy and produce novel, holistic understanding of how biological systems function and interact across different biological scales of organization. Again, because this is in the core program now, the proposals are accepted anytime. And so if you are interested in integrative research, the Biology Directorate have different programs that address this style of research. And so this decision tree helps PIs understand which program is the best suited to support your research. And part of what will help you determine which program to apply to has to do with the scope of your research. So in other words, how big is your research? So if you are a single investigator, you can look at that top entrance right there in blue. Your project should probably go to one of the core programs. If you are a part of a collaborative team and your research crosses clusters or divisions, and it's a good fit between those different programs, and with a smaller scope, there is the process for co-review across the divisions. And so that's a possibility as well. If the project is larger in scope, you have many investigators or multiple systems, it should probably go to a special program. And so the special programs that we're highlighting here is, again, this track in the core solicitation, the Integrative Research in Biology, or INT Bio track. Again, if your size, your scope of your research is intermediate, that is probably the one to target. And if it's even larger in scope than that, including training in your approach, the biology integration institutions might be appropriate for you. The key is, and I'm going to keep saying this, is to reach out to a program officer to discuss the suitability of your project for these different programs. A good way to do this is to provide the program officer a one-page summary of your research so that they can get a better handle on what hypotheses you're testing and where you should submit. Okay, and so the iOS division has a synthesis center for understanding organismal resilience. And this center is to advance our ability to explain and predict organismal resiliency and plasticity in response to complex and dynamic environmental circumstances encountered over a lifespan of an organism through the synthesis of various data sets at multiple scales and levels. So there is, you can see the due date is January 12th, 2024. And there is a program webinar planned for November, and then that will be recorded and available to you online. So the Synthesis Center will spur community research using existing data and talk about future uses for products of this synthesis into future research endeavors. There's also the Biodiversity on a Changing Planet solicitation, and these are interdisciplinary proposals addressing grand challenges in biodiversity science within the context of unprecedented environmental change. So these proposals may include researchers that will be supported by the federal science agencies of China, Brazil, and/or South Africa. The EDGE program, or Enabling Discovery Through Genomic Tools, supports the development of tools and resources in testing hypotheses relating to genotype to phenotype in non-model systems. And this is in partnership with the National Institute of Health. Again, that deadline on the bottom is listed February 15th, 2024. So this is a collaboration between NSF's MCB and the DOE. So this is accelerating innovations and biomanufacturing approaches through collaboration between NSF and the DOE BETO funded Agile Biofoundry. So the Biofoundry is a consortium of national laboratories dedicated to accelerating biomanufacturing and decarbonizing the economy. The ABA collaborates with industry and academia to rapidly innovate the development of bio-based products. And so this program supports the design, build, test, learn capabilities at the Agile Biofoundry in order to develop testable prototypes based on the latest advances in synthetic engineering biology. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the Biology Directorate's efforts in building capacity. And first, I'm going to focus on human capital. Okay, and so this is a program leading cultural change through professional societies of biology. The NSF Biology Directorate recognizes that cultural change in the biological sciences is an urgent priority because it is foundational to increasing diversity, equity, and inclusion in our discipline. And so there are 3 different tracks in this program: the evaluation track, the design track, and the implementation track. These can be submitted by institutions of higher education or nonprofits. And the idea behind this is to leverage the work of those professional societies towards facilitating this necessary cultural change. So this is describing the Safe and Inclusive Work Environment Plan, is describing a new supplement that is required and intended to address issues of harassment in non-inclusive environments in field research settings. And so that 2-page supplement includes a description of the field setting of the researchers and their proposed research and the unique challenges for that team, as well as the steps the proposing organization will take to nurture an inclusive off-campus or off-site working environment which would include processes to establish shared team definitions of roles, responsibilities, and culture. It will also include a description of the communication processes within the offsite team and to the organization that minimize these singular points within the communication pathway. And last, this 2-page supplement will also include a description of the organizational mechanisms that will be used for reporting, responding to, and resolving issues of harassment if they do arise. And so you should also understand that this plan, the Safe and Inclusive Work Environment Plan, is in lieu of AOR certification when submitting to the programs included in the pilot, which I'm going to highlight here. And so all of the biology core programs are included, as well as a number of special solicitations listed here. So the Biology Directorate supports people throughout, their researchers throughout their career. And bio support for the workforce considers the fact that career pathways are not always simple and linear, and then do have different on-ramps and career pivots, as well as different barriers for different people. And so as a result of this, we've engaged in a portfolio analysis and started new programs to ensure that we're considering institution type, accommodating multiple career paths, as well as targeting these career transition points. And so you can see here that we have just some of the education and training programs that we have in biology and how they align with these various career transition points. And so we're going to describe a few of those now. And the first one here is BioRETs, or research experiences for teacher sites in biological sciences. And this is active research in the biological sciences by cohorts of middle school teachers, high school teachers, and or community college faculty. And these awards are expected to leverage the teacher's research experience for curriculum development, with the goal of enriching their classroom practices and inspiring a broad swath of students to consider higher education and careers in STEM. And this deadline is July 31st annually. The RAMP program, or Research and Mentoring for Postbaccalaureates in Biological Sciences, support full-time research, mentoring, and training for research college graduates who have had few or no research or training opportunities during their college education in these fields typically supported by our directorate. And so these proposals are expected to create strong evidence-based and inclusive mentorship programs that advance the goal of creating a competitive and highly representative science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, or STEM, workforce in the United States. That deadline is January 18th, upcoming in 2024. The PRFB, or the Postdoctoral Research Fellowship Program in Biology, is targeted at recipients of doctoral degrees in the last 15 months. And this is a 3-year postdoctoral fellowship. So these fellowships follow current topical areas, and the topical areas that are current right now are the rules of life, plant genomics, and broadening participation. And so the next deadline is November 7th, 2024. So the BRC Bio program, or Building Research Capacity of New Faculty in Biology, is targeted towards new assistant professors in non-R1 institutions. So minority serving institutions, primarily undergraduate institutions, and other universities and colleges that are not among the nation's most research intensive and resourced institutions. And so these are proposals that include descriptions of projects that would enable the establishment of research programs for these new faculty members and allow them to position themselves to apply for future grants to sustain their research productivity and also enrich the undergraduate research experiences where they are, and thereby grow the STEM workforce. And so the upcoming proposal window is May 1st to July 1st of 2024. The Mid-Career Advancement or MCA program is targeted at scientists and engineers at the associate professor rank or equivalent within 3 years at that rank. And this program is intended to support associate professors and help them make that transition to full professor, but also to ensure that their research program continues to be vibrant during this difficult transition, which can carry with it many service and administrative responsibilities. And so the submission window for this is between February 1 and March 1 annually. Okay, so now we're going to talk about biology's efforts at building capacity in infrastructure. And so I'll describe some of these programs. The National Ecological Observatory Network, or NEON, has 81 field sites across 20 ecoclimatic regions, which include Alaska, Hawaii, and Puerto Rico. The great thing about this program is that they produce a lot of data products as well as education and training opportunities. So this is a huge source of available and free science research data. It also includes teaching and training modules, workshops on data science, Code Hub software, online tutorials. A lot of teachers use these modules and data sets for their classes, as well as faculty mentoring networks. If you are interested in research support and assignable assets, certainly reach out to them, and they can provide research support services as well as access to their infrastructure. The Long-Term Ecological Research Network, or LTER, has 28 sites that support ecological discovery on the influence of long-term and large-scale phenomena. Again, this is a great source of freely available data, almost 40 years of sustained observations, which are publicly available. And these sites train a diverse group of graduate students, undergraduates, and others in ecological science, as well as provide educational outreach through these LTER schoolyard series and other efforts. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to talk about today is how to learn more and to reach us, the program directors. And so the best way, the easiest way to figure out what's going on at NSF is to sign up for emails. And so you simply just need to navigate to www.nsf.gov and then scroll down until you see a little yellow sign up button, and you just click on that and then follow the prompts. And what ends up happening is that you will suddenly magically get emails of new solicitations, events, due date reminders, BioLo's quarterly newsletter. And so it's a really great source for information on new priorities and solicitations. All 4 of our divisions offer blogs, and that includes a variety of different information, including new solicitations, upcoming office hours, as well as job openings. So the biology virtual office hours is also offered by each of the divisions, and the times are listed on the bottom. The days, third Tuesday, for example, for DBI from 3 to 4 p.m. And then these informational webinars range in their topics, but they offer webinars regarding new and ongoing funding opportunities, topics of general interest. And then at the end of these virtual office hours, like this one, they'll allow for open questions from the audience to be answered live. So take-home messages for everyone is that the biology core programs have no deadlines. So the idea is to allow you the flexibility in your submission of your proposal and to submit your proposal when it's ready. There are multiple funding mechanisms for supporting your research. There's interdisciplinary research programs. There are programs supporting research across different career stages, research programs supporting infrastructure, as well as education, outreach, and broadening some participation in STEM. So we highly encourage you to reach out to program officers in your programs to discuss your ideas. And the best way to do this is to just send a one-page summary of your research and broader impacts plans, listing your hypotheses. And that way the program officers can look at it and then tell you what would be the best place to submit your research and have it evaluated by your peers. And so last, there are many ways for you to become involved in NSF. Our merit review system is peer-based, so we always need reviewers, either ad hoc or panelists. NSF regularly recruits what we call rotators from academia to serve as program directors, and even sometimes as division directors. So please don't hesitate to contact us to offer your service. It's a great way to learn about NSF and our programs. And the best strategy to request to be a reviewer is to send your 2-page CV to a program director and ask them to consider you, or to pass along your information to other colleagues if you would have a better fit in a different division, for example. We would really appreciate your volunteering. And so now we will take any questions that you may have.
Okay. All right. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Bianca, Betsy, sorry, Betsy, for that fantastic presentation. And we are joined by, as you said, you joined by your colleagues. You got the everybody on the line here, participants. You've got the dream team here of bio program officers. So in addition to Betsy, we've got Doctors Joel Abram, Bianca Garner, and Colette St. Mary. So, okay, so we've gotten a lot of questions submitted. So let's kind of dive right in. The first one, I believe, is for Colette. She's going to take this. So the person is saying they have a faculty member who wants to submit an EDGE grant in 2024, and they have a standard grant in review currently. They're going to submit another, proposal in 2024. Are there limitations on how many proposals a PI can submit in a calendar year? And they know that, keeping in mind that they cannot be, paid for more than 2 calendar months by all of their NSF grants cumulatively. Yeah.
So I think this is a really important question, because we see PIs attempting this approach regularly. And no, there are no limits that are set that might dissuade somebody from taking this approach. But I would encourage that PI to consider, especially as they receive reviews on their projects, whether they have the bandwidth to submit this many competitive proposals. A competitive proposal requires some real dedication and attention to detail, and submitting a successful revision once you've been declined requires essentially that same effort. It is extremely rare that any PI at any career stage is successful in submitting this many projects per calendar year. So I guess I would say, yes, that PI can go right ahead and do that if he or she would prefer. But we would advise to take more time and prioritize fewer projects and do them really well.
Great. All right. Thank you very much for that. Okay. So I think next up is Joel is going to cover this question about are there bio programs specifically for community colleges?
Yeah, that's a great question. To my knowledge, there's not a specific community college specific program, but there are a number of programs NSF-wide, the RUI and ROA programs. And so I think we can add those to the chat. That's research in undergraduate institutions and research opportunity awards. And so those are specifically for institutions that are predominantly undergraduate institutions, which of course includes community colleges. And there's some information on one of the websites, so I'll add that to the chat for everybody real quickly. But you would basically apply directly through a program. And so you'd want to contact one of the program directors associated with the program you're interested in. I also want to point out that a lot of times, particularly in community colleges, research and teaching are often intertwined. And there's some good programs over in EDU as well. The ITYC, which is Innovation in Two-Year Colleges. It's one of the IU's sub-programs, and that's specifically for community colleges and can fund, particularly if there's student research that's supposed to improve their educational outcomes, things like that. That's oftentimes appropriate for that program. And if it's multiple community colleges, then I'm actually a great contact as well, because I'm the one of the program directors on the RCN UBE program, the Research Coordination Networks in Undergraduate Biology Education. And we have a number of community college members of networks, and then really just solely community college networks. And again, that are funding kind of research and education type work. And so that's the type of thing that sometimes it's worth reaching out to a program director. Certainly reach out to me and I can help guide you the right way.
Okay, great. Thank you, Joel. All right. Another question Colette's going to handle. So this person is saying that, they thought that projects fundable by NIH were not priorities for NSF. So, how does this, how do we balance work for the emerging infectious diseases, FY 2024 priority, which overlaps with the NIH National Institutes of Allergy and Infectious Diseases?
So you heard what Betsy said in her presentation about sort of the bounds of what we consider our remit versus that of NIH. But the reason I wanted to respond to this question verbally is because the realm of infectious disease, of course, crosses all organisms. And all those other organisms are of interest to us. And indeed, some of our programs include organisms that also cause disease in humans, but our focus is on the broader transmission of disease and the players in that transmission. So I'm going to put in the chat 2 examples of programs under this auspice of emerging infectious disease to give you a flavor of the kinds of things we would like to see. But fundamentally, everything except human disease, human infectious disease, is of interest to us.
Okay. All right. Great. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. This next question is for Betsy. So although proposals can be submitted at any time, and usually it takes about 6 months to make a funding decision, does that 6-month period also count for the timing for funding to start? Or is there a time when funding can be expected to start, maybe waiting until the next fiscal year or so forth?
Yeah, that is a great question. And so the short answer to that is no. So generally, our standard is that the majority of our proposals, the PIs are informed within 6 months, roughly 6 months, of whether it is going to be funded or if it's not going to be funded. But that funding process actually takes a little while after that, probably another 6 to 8 weeks after that, generally. And so it really just depends on the proposal. Sometimes people have to get permits in hand before we can make the award. And so there's a bit of a range, but 6 months to understanding the outcome is what we're targeting in terms of whether it'll be an award or a decline. And then in terms of submitting for, when you could submit, what would be the latest you could submit for the next fiscal year? We don't really tell people about that because that would effectively be a deadline, right? And we don't want that, right? We want people to submit when they're ready. And also, again, it just depends on the proposal. And so, our job is making sure that we have the best possible merit review for a given proposal. And sometimes that means co-review. And so there's just a lot of different factors in play as far as the timing goes. But what we try to do is get that decision back to you within 6 months of submission.
Okay, fantastic. All right. Okay, back to Colette. Which program includes researchers supported by science agencies in Brazil, China, and South Africa? And is it only those countries that can apply, or other nations allowed? Other nations in Africa allowed to apply?
So the one that was mentioned is Biodiversity on a Changing Planet, or BOCP, and I'll put the link into the chat momentarily. But this is in a broader context of how we work with other nations to support science. First off, the NSF sees the scientific enterprise as an international one. So all of our programs accept international participants in the project, and certainly it's very common to see international field work. What we of course want to focus on is supporting the national our national citizens and our institutions, students, and faculty, because we're the US National Science Foundation. So often we try and partner with other national science foundations of other nations so that we can foster the collaborative interactions between scientists in our respective countries. And that is the kind of thing that Betsy was alluding to in the Biodiversity on a Changing Planet program. You also see it in the Ecology and Evolution of Infectious Disease program, which I put the link for. And in all these cases, some of the projects consist of joint applications to the National Science Foundations of 2 nations, or sometimes even 3 nations, to support the respective participants. Now, other international participants in those projects are often included, and that might be members of the scientific community in African nations, or it might be in any other part of the world. So it's one way in which we can better foster international collaboration by partnering with our analogs in other nations, but it's certainly not the only way we support international scientific efforts. If you have questions about a specific collaboration, please reach out to program director and talk to them about that in detail.
Great. All right. Thank you so much. Okay. Next 2 questions are for Bianca. This person wants to know more about programs for undergraduate students, such as the research experiences for undergraduates, or REU.
Okay, thank you. So for the REU, those can be identified either as through a site or a supplement. So first, the sites, those are in places where there's an independent project and students will be engaged in the research of that project. And so that can be based on a single discipline or an academic department, or it may offer interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary research opportunities. The window in terms of the deadline for submission, so that does have a deadline, is August 2024, August 21st, 2024. And then thereafter, it's the 3rd Wednesday in August. So we heard a little bit about the core programs that don't have deadlines. This is not one of them. So if you're thinking about submitting for an REU, please be mindful of that. The second component of the REU is a supplement. And so these are for PIs who have existing research grants, but they want to engage 1 or 2 or 5 undergraduates. And so they can request an REU supplement. In this instance, what you want to do is reach out to your cognizant program officer to discuss that process and how you can apply. Now, separate from that, in terms of undergraduates, there's also the Research for Undergraduate Institutions solicitation, where PIs and undergraduates at those institutions can apply for and receive research funding. And that is accepted anytime.
Okay, great. All right. Thank you so much. And next one, this is a very, very timely question. Many PIs, this is the person saying, many PIs in Texas are concerned about their ability to properly demonstrate their commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion since the passing of Senate Bill 17. Does that affect their competitiveness? Does NSF have any resources in place for the PIs to help with completing their broader impacts or the safe and inclusive working environment statements?
So each institution of higher education is going to have to really carefully review their state's laws. NSF cannot provide advice or guidance on any state law. However, please note that NSF has an unwavering commitment to engaging everyone in STEM. And so NSF is committed to reaching the missing millions. That is our core priority. And doing this is central to the nation's long-term economic and national competitiveness. So what we do is to continue to encourage you to explore opportunities that engage diverse individuals in all types of opportunities. NSF does not penalize any PI from any state where there is such language. So if you have questions or concerns about that, we really encourage you to reach out to a program director so that they can help to sort of address any questions you might have about that.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, Bianca, I'm going to give you a little bit of a break here, and I'm going to go back to Betsy and ask, somebody asked, what is the funding range for each of the programs?
Sorry, it took a while to get the unmute on. So the funding range depends on the program. And so if you're interested in any of the particular programs or solicitations that we listed today, then we would encourage you to go ahead and check out those websites. And they all have, when you open up that solicitation specifically, they all say what they expect to fund, the number of awards to make in that fiscal year, and then how much that we expect to make in terms of the funds in total. So each individual solicitation lists that within the solicitation.
Okay. All right. Great. Thank you. Thank you. So back to Bianca. There seems to be some overlap between NSF Bio and NIH, NIGMS funding areas. So how do people know, which agency they should apply to?
So one thing we want to strongly encourage you to do is to create a one-page document for program directors. In this one-page document, you're going to have a brief introduction, you're going to talk about your intellectual merit, and you're going to talk about your broader impacts. You're going to send this to a program director in the area which you are interested and have a conversation. We acknowledge that it can be difficult not only to distinguish between NIGMS and NSF, but also which area your research falls. And so creating this one-pager will help the program director guide you to the most appropriate home for your project.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Okay, we have a few more minutes for questions here. So I'm going to jump around a little bit here. I'm going to go to Betsy again. Are there any programs for lecturers?
Another great question. And so, and maybe Joel can jump in here, but all of the programs and solicitations that we've discussed are open to anyone who can submit as a PI through their host institution. And so it's really limited by who can be a PI on the cover page of an NSF proposal is really limited by the institution. So some institutions only allow certain, faculty members to submit proposals. And so that's really a question for your home institution. And if you can submit to a particular solicitation and then you can do that, but we don't limit who can apply to our solicitations.
Okay. All right, great. I am going to go back to Joel. And this person is asking, can you speak about this rumor that organizations or PIs that don't have a lot of NSF funding shouldn't apply because they likely won't get NSF funding?
Yeah, I just want to really point out that there's a number of different efforts that NSF is making, I think, so we have some patterns, and sometimes there's things like systemic barriers, for instance, to PIs being able to get funding through their institution. And we have programs like the Granted program that's really about funding work to build capacity in institutions that haven't. Bianca mentioned the missing millions, which is really a key priority for NSF right now. And so how do we identify PIs and institutions and states that haven't been represented fully in the funding? If you're interested in specific funding that would be applicable in a given case, I encourage you to reach out to me or to any program officer that's really in the area that you're interested in. But I do think that there's actually quite a bit of funding and very specific programs, some of the ones I shared, that are about addressing some of those gaps in funding and the or differences that we might see in funding rates. And so any of us are happy to help you find those opportunities if that's something that you're looking for.
Great. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to go back to Bianca. For center level proposals that are cross-disciplinary, how do you recommend reaching out to the program officers to ask about co-funding? Should that be one at a time or CC all of the relevant POs? How would you address that?
Please don't CC everyone, because everyone will think that they've responded to you and no one will have, because we do a lot of the co-funding and working behind the scenes, right? So I'm going to suggest you reach out to one program director, have a conversation with them, talk with them about who you think or where you think might be a secondary home, and let them work with you through that process. But if you email too many people, then you might not get a single response. So one person.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. I'm going to because we just have time for probably another couple of questions. So let me toss it back to Colette. Somebody was asking, can you say a little bit about how review panels are put together for cross-disciplinary or cross-division programs?
So every review panel is created based on the content that is going to be reviewed in the panel. So when we have interdisciplinary programs or programs that span several research areas, then we're looking for representation across that whole spectrum. In those primarily integrative activities, we're also looking for scientists who have demonstrated a history of having done integrative research and being broad thinkers in their own field. So we're looking for the peers of the submitters fundamentally in the review.
Okay. All righty. And one more, also for Colette. So which NSF funding program is suited to a health-related project that is also ecologically relevant and interdisciplinary?
So this depends heavily on what exactly you're asking about. But because the NSF and bio in particular is interested in understanding basic fundamental processes, even when we're focused on a disease context, you want to think about what are the basic questions that you're asking in the context of this research, and then seek the program that focuses on those basic questions. It might be a core program In iOS, it might be an integrative program, depending on exactly what your questions are. Sorry, I can't be more helpful.
Okay, all right, no, not a problem, not a problem. Okay, so I think that we got to, pretty much almost all of the questions. And so I really thank all of you for your time and providing all of this wonderful information to the participants today. So I want to, and for the people, listening in, I want to thank you for joining us today. And please join us tomorrow for our final day of the NSF Grads Conference. We hope you have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much, and goodbye.